Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
We can hear you now.
Okay, you can hear me now. All right.
If
All right.
you can hear me now.
Hello, everybody.
All right, Joe.
If you haven't figured it out already, I'm Joe Thompson, president of the Larry Dierker chapter. Welcome to the Thanksgiving edition of our meeting. Before I go any further, I would like to recognize probably a little piece of history that's happened in this chapter, Bob. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we've ever had anybody in our chapter get married until now. We have two chapter members who got married for some reason. And they are here tonight. So, Vince and Lena, congratulations. Vince and Lena Trovato. That's true. Lena, congratulations, you're stuck.
Well, we missed last month, but we had pretty good excuse.
Yeah, that's right. They missed last month. They were busy. You know, maybe that's a bad choice word, but they were yeah. Anyway, congratulations. All right. One thing real quick. We have a couple of new members this month. And first of all, I'd like to recognize them. Those who signed up, who may or may not be in attendance, and those who are in attendance tonight. Okay, so if you're a new person, the person who bought you, I'm going to ask that person to introduce you. But first off, we have two new members, Christopher Marullo. Is Christopher here? In Houston? Okay. And Sean Smith from Grand Blanc, Michigan.
Long trek.
It's a long trek. It's a long commute, you know? So
It's one of Maxwell's neighbors.
one of Maxwell's neighbors. That's right. From Grand Blanc, Michigan. Okay. Now in attendance tonight, we have a couple of new people, new faces. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna start over here. Carl, introduce who brought. I'm gonna grab something.
Well, it's my friend Tommy Skelly. And he and I went to high school, so Fruity don't went to high school.
Nice to meet you guys.
How long are you there?
6
years.
It's one of you graduate.
All right, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
We hope you return. Thank you. Hey, always welcome. Ian?
I'm Ian. If you don't know me, this is my friend. His name is also Ian.
I see a double or here in Delta. Yes.
He's doing students at Rice. He's a sport management major, club baseball president. He interned as a Hall of Fame in New York last summer. Yeah. He's a big baseball guy. A lot of big baseball guy. One of my friends. I figured I'd drag him along.
Strength to Ian. And for a lot of you new people, we got some people that haven't been to a meeting in a while. So if you don't mind introducing yourself, you haven't been here in a while. For all the new people around, maybe they don't know who you are. Mr. San Diego Padre, you.
Fred Rogers, I'm the former president of the Ted Williams chapter in San Diego for 6 years. There you go, living out here. Been here several times, but I was out of town for the last year.
Yeah.
Rogers. I'm the one that brought Joe West to the
Oh boy.
a couple of years ago.
Yes, that Joe West.
Yeah, well,
All right.
There you go, Bob. Don't forget Bob.
Oh, Bob. I'm sorry, Bob.
Yeah, Bob, see, nothing. Yeah, I've been teaching at Rice and it ends at 6:30, so I haven't been able to go to meetings for a couple of years. But I canceled class today.
You know, it's Thanksgiving week, so you and I are ready to come.
If you don't know, Matthew designed our chapter SABR logo.
Matt, yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Been involved for the years.
That's nice to see. See, you remember you? You remember?
I live out of state, unfortunately, I live in New York.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. As you just found out tonight, we have somebody from Michigan.
Maxwell Banks is from there.
Maxwell is, hey, you don't even have to live in the same country. Maxwell is in Toronto. All right. So, and all of you online, Alec,
Well, what's your seat?
nice to see you. I got his email earlier today. Please send me the link. I don't know if it
Greetings
was for
from
me or
Seattle.
for Zach. Hi, Art. Hi, how you doing, Alec?
Very easy to be center sport.
Yeah. And Carly, and Greg, and Marcia, and our great speaker, who I'll introduce here in a minute. Okay, but first off, probably, in my opinion, the most important baseball thing that's happened in the last month. I'll have to say this. I just have to say, the fans of this team were really kind of worried in the beginning. They really stuck with their team. And eventually they did something that made us all very proud. They made their fan base very proud. And they won a championship. Okay? And I'm not talking about the team that you think of. Last night, my grandson was part of a team that won a tournament in Northeast. All right? First time in first place in the tournament, they played a triple header. And they won all 3 games. So congratulations to my grandson and the Corps. No, this is the team match with the Corps. Baseball select. So you know what my life is like now. All right. His manager is Michael Bellamy. All right. Probably never heard of him, but he said he was a catcher, probably in high school. But he looks like he was big enough to do it in college. So congrats to the Corps.
Is that the little boy that went to the SABR conference?
Yes, that was my grandson. Yeah. So he had a couple of RBIs, made a jumping catch in left field. So I was real proud of it. Oh, and by the way, congratulations to the Arlington Rangers, I guess. The Arlington Rangers. And their 500,000 fans that showed up to their parade, right? Congratulations to them. All right. After 61 years, they finally did something to make their fan base proud. Okay. So congrats to the Rangers. Anyway, the best thing about that is we won't have to travel far to go get the trophy next year. All right. All right. Okay. So last month we had a great meeting with Bill Brown. Brownie was talking about his book, his upcoming, his new baseball fiction book about baseball in America in the early 1960s. And everybody that was here participated. So I'm real happy everybody that was here and everybody had a chance to talk. Even if, I had a chance to participate and I wasn't even born until 1971. So, I was happy about that. But Brownie listened to everybody's ideas and I'm looking forward to Brownie's new book, whenever that comes out. Okay. So what we're going to do now is talk about a couple of other things. We were supposed to have a SABR chapter, a national SABR leaders meeting in November, but that got pushed back or something. So we're going to have it in December. A couple of things I wanted to talk about with you guys about that meeting. We'll just have to wait until December meetings.
The winter meeting.
Well, I guess the winter meetings. Yeah, if you want to call it that, they pushed it back. Next month, please be here. Our good old friend Greg Lucas is coming back. Greg Lucas is going to talk about an updated edition of his 2018 Astros Legend. He's done a lot of more research, updated the book, and we're going to ask him what he's been doing for the last couple of years. And if you haven't met Greg Lucas, please come next month, December the 18th. All right? And join us for that. In January, Jerry Miller from the Winter Meeting Committee, he's the Winter Meeting Coordinator for the Roger Hornsby chapter. On January 6th, a few of us in the chapter always go up to the Roger Hornsby chapter, the Bill Gilbert Winter Meeting, and to spend all day. They usually have some really good guests. I haven't got the guest list yet, but last year they had some really good guests, including Nancy Finley. Y'all know that name. Okay. So if you want something to do in early January, you spend all day talking to people about or listening to some great presentations about baseball, feel free to join us on January 6th.
Great day, about 8 to 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
Right.
Have to drive through Luling on 510 to get to San Marcos. Which puts you at the Luling City Market, when you stop barbecue place in Texas, Diamond on your way home. And it's in that old building on top of the hill there at Texas State. Really nice day.
Yeah, trying to check that out. Okay, thanks, Mike. Also, our first meeting of 2024 will be January 15th. And Jay Barrel, who was supposed to talk with us last month, who had to reschedule, he has reconfirmed that he will be able to talk with us on January 15th. He's the Astros Vice President of Business Strategy and Analytics. Okay, so that'll be the first meeting in January. And don't forget SABR 52 in August 7th through 11th. Hopefully we can have all of you come, because I'd rather spend August in Minneapolis than Houston, just for the weather. So August 7th through 11th, if you haven't had any, if you don't have any plans, just come see, join us in Minneapolis, okay? If you haven't seen our newest edition of the newsletter, came out really this week, Tony?
Yeah.
The newest edition of the newsletter, or last week, got some great stories in there. Please check that out. If you're thinking about writing a story for the winter 2024 newsletter, just send your idea to Tony or Scott, and
Your deadline's January 15th, so make it your New Year's resolution, write a story there.
there you go. It could be anything. It could be a memory. It could be what you think the Astros should do in the off season. And speaking of which, I heard a rumor now. I wanted to ask the group.
Yeah, let's see.
Should we let Alex Bregman walk?
No.
Should we? Bob? You probably heard that.
Yes, I have.
Should we let Bregman walk?
It depends on, well, not walk, but I guess for him.
Get something for him? Okay. All right.
I think he wants to walk.
He wants to walk.
He wants to walk.
Where do they go?
He only hits lines.
On there. Why do you have the farm today?
We need a farm. Yeah, exactly. That's my point.
Why we having the farm?
My point online talking to people is, who are you going to replace Bregman with? So just things out there. All right. Does anybody have any ideas of who we should sign or try to sign this winter?
I understand there's still.
Serious for Dylan C.
We should sign Ian and Tom.
Who?
Ian and Tom.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Mike Trout. Okay.
Yeah.
Package him with Otani. Bring him here.
Eduardo Rodriguez. and Tigers.
Eduardo Rodriguez of the Tigers.
Free agent.
Okay.
Oh, Benny Sands and Tigers.
So you're saying we should add a pitcher?
Trevor Bauer.
Trevor Bauer?
Clean now.
Come on, Chris. Yeah, okay, all right.
Him and-
Spots tonight already.
Him and Bregman are good
I'm
friends.
just gonna sign it.
They're good cheap.
Not gonna go on sign.
After the Robert Osuna fiasco.
He was innocent of that stuff.
Okay.
He was not guilty by it.
Okay.
The girl admitted she lied.
She lied.
Okay, there you go. He's clean,
Yep.
but it's still Trevor Bauer.
He's not clean.
Okay, all right. Is that kind of like signing Cody Bellinger though? That kind of, you know what he said about the other.
Money talks.
Money talk.
Money heals all wounds.
All right.
That's just.
I am very curious as to what Crane is going to do over the winter.
He ain't gonna spend much.
He ain't gonna spend money.
Tighten the wallet. We lost our vice president of player acquisitions and minor league activity. The gentleman spoke to us, Mr. Gross.
Uh-huh.
He went to the Mets yesterday.
Went to the Met.
Went to the Mets. He had drafted more players than any other team in the history of the last 5 years. He said 87 players that the Astros have drafted that have signed a professional contract.
Good man. He spoke to us.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we lost him.
I don't know. I hope they do something. I really hope they do something.
Good people.
Yeah.
So, if you have an idea of what the Astros should do in the offseason, or if you have a personal memory or something, or if you want to review a book or write something, then please write it up. 600 to 1,000 words at the most, right? 600 words, Scott? 600 words? Up to 1,500 and send it to Scott or Tony.
Yeah.
All right? For the upcoming newsletter.
For the editing process, is something like this hard.
The editing process is not hard. That's what Tony said. Editor-in-chief, right there. Okay. Yeah.
And speaking of books, you might mention to those that came in, like.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. We also have what book is this? Our box, 7th or 8th box from the Tal Smith Generous Collection.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you want a free book for the holidays, you know, Christmas is coming up.
Read it, do a report, send it in.
Read it, do a report, or read it and give it to somebody, or something like that for the holidays. It's all free here. Okay. All right. So without further ado, I've talked long enough. Zach is our guest speaker of the night. Zach has written a new book, and we're just going to let Zach talk because he's been talking. You just came from another meeting, right, Zach?
I did. I came out of a New Jersey meeting. Elsian Field chapter, I believe it was David Krell's chapter. So,
Okay.
but happy to be here with the Houston group right now.
Take it away, Zach. All right.
All righty. Well, go ahead. I'm here. Thank you very much for inviting me, for coming out. Excited to talk to you about my new book called Up, which is a collection of call-up and debut stories. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right, so you should just be seeing the, yep, that's what I can verify looking at the projected screen there. All right, so call up, ball players remember becoming major leaguers. So first off, though, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and why I would think of this particular idea. What would inspire me? A little bit about me, chair of the Dusty Baker Sacramento SABR chapter, actually been involved with that chapter since I was in high school. I'm very involved, and one of the passions for me is the old Pacific Coast League. Work with the Pacific Coast League Historical Society, Advisory Committee. My great uncle used to play in the old Pacific Coast League. So I used to go to his reunions, hang out with him, got to know a lot of his former teammates and opponents, started interviewing a lot of them. And that's kind of what grew over the last 30 plus years. But about that time, when I was a young baseball fan, my aunt got me The Glory of Their Times for my 15th birthday. And I had heard of the book before, kind of flipped through it at the library, but this is the first time I really dove into it. And it really, from that point on, it's been my favorite baseball book. What Ritter was able to do was take those first-person narratives, and although those players were nearly a century older than me, I could still relate to them. Yeah, the human interest side, the behind-the-scenes side, the passion, the feelings, the emotions, he was able to capture from those first-person narratives. And I felt a connection to that particular book. And I have always had, or since, I've had a preference for research or for story writing, or like just obtaining that information from that first-person perspective. Figure that's a much better way to capture the feeling and emotions of stories from that first person story. A writer can put together a great biography, but I don't think there's a substitute for that first person emotion. Now, like most of us, I dreamed of becoming a Major League Baseball player. However, I will disclose to you, I would say my batting average in Little League was probably around 200. So if you're batting 200 in Little League, I'm all for high goals. but realistically, you're probably not going to go on to the big leagues. So I realized that pretty quick, but I still had that dream, right? And I'm 45 years old now, and I still dream about taking the field at Candlestick Park, which was demolished many years ago. And I think that a lot of us can relate to that. Going back to, referencing my uncle was a big prospect in the old Pacific Coast League prior to World War II. Went off to the war, came back, spring training, 1946 with the Red Sox. He makes the team. Red Sox get off to a hot start, but the services of a 32-year-old or near 32-year-old rookie who hadn't pitched in almost 5 years weren't really needed, right? So he was released after a few weeks without getting into a game. The next day, he gets picked up by the Boston Braves. He's with them for about a week, and that also resulted in 0 game appearances. So his story in baseball purgatory, I guess you could say, has always been kind of interesting to me. And I mean, my uncle and I were really close. But I knew that he was really disappointed about that particular time, about not getting into a particular game and having a stat line. So I never asked him about it, but I wish I had found a way to capture the stories that he had over those just few weeks in the big leagues. But obviously now, unfortunately, it's too late. But I wish that I had done that. So there's a few pictures of me here I am as a very intimidating little leaguer who looks like he's scared of an inside pitch when he's doing nothing other than taking his baseball photos. Here I am as a right-handed Will Clark in 1989 for Halloween. And then here are some photos related to my uncle. Again, one of my favorite all-time guys. Wish I had an opportunity to capture his story. So a little bit about the book. Now, the book is a collection of 109 first-person player stories. All of them are original interviews. And again, I tried to capture the feelings and emotions of becoming a major leaguer. If you wanted to find detailed like breakdowns of games, you could go to Baseball Reference, but I wanted to capture the feelings and emotions, the behind the scenes elements of getting called up and the orientation process and getting in that first game. Player debuts range from 1961. Sam McDowell from the Indians is the very first one. Came up 1961 as an 18-year-old. The most recent debut is Patrick Wisdom. Patrick Wisdom came up in 2018 with the St. Louis Cardinals, and he's now with the Chicago Cubs. Now, Major League service time, my only criteria on this is if you had Major League service time. So Major League service time ranges 2 days to over 2 decades. Jerry Royce is the one with the longest experience in there. I believe he pitched 22 years in the big leagues. The one with the least amount of experience, and I originally wanted to make sure everybody at least had a debut. I wasn't planning on including any kind of phantom players like my uncle, but there was one player that had just way too good of a story as a phantom player to not include in the book. So he's in the book, but 2 days to over 2 decades. I did arrange all the stories by debut order. I put them into 4 different sections, 60s and 70s, then the 80s, 90s, and since 2000. And you can see some common themes throughout some of these stories that are going on, just how people get notified about the news, how they react, they're in some of the earlier ones, they get notified by letter. Now they're getting text messages to call me, those types of things. You'll see different trends of how that news happens. Nearly all teams are represented. So a little bit about the time frame sections to provide a little bit of context. Now, what's going on in the 60s and 70s? Obviously, a huge time. Those decades were a huge time of expansion. There were a lot of minor leagues that disbanded. You got your first amateur draft. Labor changed a little bit. And there's 17 players from that particular time frame. 1980s, you have stories that are impacted by the labor strife of the strike of 1981. One of the hugest things, obviously, this is dating back before even the 80s, but 80s are really when it kind of gained the most prominence, and even more into the 90s and now, but the role of relief pitching and closers. Obviously, that impacted major league rosters with carrying more relief pitchers. For a period in the 80s too, rosters got cut down to 24 players. So obviously that impacted how many roster moves, how many players were going up and down. 15 players from the 1980s. 1990s, obviously another decade of expansion, more labor challenges. There's some stories impacted by the lockout and the strike. And also a lot more changes to the disabled list now, injured list, changing rosters more frequently. 42 players, definitely the most of any era was the 90s, 42 players. Since 2000, obviously statistical analysis has been around since long before 2000, but over the last generation or so, a lot more emphasis is put on that statistical analysis and making roster moves based upon filling those particular holes and through statistical analysis. A lot of changes in the minor leagues. Obviously a lot of changes even more recently than 2018, which is the most frequent debut, but minor leagues have gone through a lot of restructuring. A lot of changes especially over the last few years with the injured list. A lot more, ups and downs. 35 players made their debuts since 2000. Those are in the book. And then I have there in the center, this isn't limited to a particular time frame, really started maybe in like the 50s, really, but it's definitely grown more. And that's the rise in international talent, obviously, is impacted big league rosters as well. So I told you a little bit about the book. I'm going to break down the actual stories. Again, a collection of first-person human interest stories. So I want this book to be enjoyed by baseball fans, the diehard baseball fans, but also those baseball fans that may just have a small interest in the sport. If you're, inspired by uplifting stories, as long as you have just a basic understanding of baseball, I think that you will appreciate this book. And again, the goal was to obtain what can't be obtained from reading a box score or, going through the game log on Baseball Reference. And that was the feelings and emotions of reaching that goal of being a Major League Baseball player. The first question I asked players was, when did you first realize you had the talent to become a Major League Baseball player? Now, I didn't ask that question because I necessarily wanted an answer like when I was 18 or when I was a junior in college or when I was in single A or double A. I asked that question with an ulterior motive. I asked that question because I knew that at that particular, once they were kind of thinking about a particular time frame, they would also be thinking about some of the mentors they had, some of the coaches that they had, some of the things that were going on in their lives, their parents. And then as the interview progressed, oftentimes I would hear references return for that first question, whether it be, who they called after they got that news or who was at their debut game, those types of things. I knew that if I asked that question from the get-go, that it would spark those memories of those names, those relationships that would then reoccur later on in those stories. These stories have only been edited very minimally from the interview transcripts. So like if somebody, was telling a story and I had a follow-up question on something a little bit earlier, I'd obviously take that chunk, put it back in to where it's chronologically flows well. If somebody said something like, I pitched 5 or 6 innings of relief. Okay, well, if I saw Baseball Reference indicated that it was 6 or if it was 5, I'd make that change. But those are the only changes I've made. So these will read like spoken word. I wanted the story to sound like the player is telling you about their call-up and their debut. So I'll go ahead and do a few stories and I'll take some questions and answers afterwards. First story, a favorite of a lot of SABR folks, and that's Bobby Grich. Bobby Grich, 1970 Orioles is when he comes up. He's with the Rochester Red Wings. And obviously at that time, the Orioles were just phenomenal, both at the major league level and then their farm system as well. So Cal Ripken Sr. calls him into the office, Says Cal is a pretty heavy smoker. He said he, took a big drag of his Camel cigarette, blew a bunch of smoke rings up in the air, and said, "Hey, you're going to Baltimore tomorrow." Now, he's excited. He's looking forward to it. His dream is about to come true. So he reports to Memorial Stadium. He's walking towards the locker room, and he sees that there is a manager's office there. It says manager's office. It's a little bit cracked open. And he peeks his head in there, taps it, and he sees that Earl Weaver is sitting there at his desk. So he taps, opens up, says, "Hi, my name is Bobby Grich. I'm here to report, for my first day in the big leagues." And Earl Weaver looked up to him and said, "Do you have anything else to tell me?" And that was it. Earl Weaver is not the most warm and fuzzy guy, right? So, Bobby said this first orientation was a little bit taken aback, but obviously things got better. But it took a while. It took a while for Earl Weaver to warm up to players, and he became Bobby Grich became a Hall of Fame player with our team Hall of Fame, I should say, with both the Orioles and the Angels. So he definitely found his place with both teams, even with that, with Earl manager not being too warm and fuzzy with that first experience. So Bobby Grich, he's at Memorial Stadium. He takes a bus over to Washington to play the Senators for his major league debut. The guy pitching for the Senators that day was somebody that actually went to the same high school as Bobby Grich, Casey Cox. I think actually Casey Cox may have just passed away within the last few weeks. But now Casey Cox was a few years older than Bobby Grich. But think about the chances that you're making your major league debut against somebody that you're actually familiar with, that went to your same high school, just a few years older. Now, Bobby, he doesn't have a great day, doesn't have a bad day, but he's 0 for 3 with a walk. All right. The next day, he goes into the locker room and he sees this cake that says, "Welcome to Baltimore, Bobby." And he's like, "Oh, that's great. This is great. A fan, is welcoming me. This is a wonderful little, thing to receive." All right, so these are his words. I'm going to read excerpt from it. Frank Robinson and all the guys came in. He said, "Who bakes a cake for somebody who gets a walk? You didn't do anything last night. You got a walk. What's this cake all about?" He was really giving me a bad time. I said, "Well, come on, guys, just still have a piece of this cake." Pete Richard took a piece of the cake and took a bite. He goes, "Wait a minute, that's sour cream. Smell that." I started to smell it, and he goes, "No, put your nose a little closer." I heard somebody kind of giggle. I knew right then and there they were going to smash my face down into that cake if I got close enough. It was a total setup. My instincts picked up on it. I jumped away, and he tried to push me down. I think the tip of my nose hit it, but that was it. So he didn't get me. That was the first time I'd seen that prank. Anytime we had a rookie being called up during the season from there on out, I was in on the joke. We got a bunch of rookies. They would go over, smell the cake. Somebody would smash their face down into it. It was pretty funny. So that's Bobby Grich's orientation to the big leagues, his first couple of days. All right, I'm going to skip up considerably. 1997. All right, this is a very unique story. Rick DeHart. 1997 Expos is when he makes his debut. He's undrafted after college. All right. So he goes to work. He's working what he called the third shift, which is basically a midnight shift, like the night shift. And he said that before he would go report for work, he'd swing by a little, mini mart sometimes, grab his little snacks. And each week he'd pick up a edition of Baseball Weekly. And at the end of Baseball Weekly, there'd be these little, want ads or little opportunities, for different advertisements. And he saw one that was from a Taiwan league, a new Taiwan league that was looking for players to report to a tryout in Florida. All right. He's been out of baseball for a while. He figures, why not? He gets his family to, he basically passes the hat. He's able to raise $500 This cost $400 to get to. Now, they provide all the food, the housing, all that type of stuff for the week, but it was a $400 cost to go to this training camp too, to try and get a spot with this Taiwan league. Now, he goes there, he passes the hat, he gets about $500, so he has a little bit of padding beyond his, he takes a Greyhound bus from Kansas to Florida for this tryout. And he says, remember, this is, before smartphones and iPads. He said he went from Kansas to Florida with a couple of magazines and a Walkman. So definitely a different time there. But when he's at this tryout, when he's at this camp, Expos scouts were kind of, looking around, trying to, I guess you could say spy a little bit on the players. And they actually offered him an opportunity to go to camp with the Expos, and he decided to do that instead. And he's in the minor leagues for, 5 years, 6 seasons. And he gets the call up actually between double headers. He's at the point where he's kind of frustrated. He's like, oh, I don't know if this is going to happen. He says he gets his paycheck between the doubleheader. He looks at it and he literally says to his teammate, I don't think I'm going to be able to pay rent this month. And he says he crumples us up a little bit and just got a frustration, kind of puts it in his locker. And he said about 10 minutes later, the manager called him into the office. And he thought that he was actually going to get reprimanded for the way he was acting. But he got the news that he was going up to the big leagues. He actually quit, or he actually took Lee Smith's spot on the roster after Smith retired. One of his first experiences when he reports to the Expos is he gets a message on his hotel phone from Pedro Martinez saying, hey, come on down tomorrow morning. I'm going to take you out to lunch. I'm going to buy you a suit. That's one of the first things Pedro does for him. But he has his debut against the Phillies. And it went from a very good debut to a very challenging debut. And I'm going to go ahead and read his words right here. There was one out and men on first and second. Rico Bronya swings at the very first pitch, hits a weak ground ball to second base. The second baseman flips it to our shortstop, Mark Grizzlonic, who steps on the bag, and he starts walking towards the dugout. He thought there were 3 outs. There were only 2 outs. He didn't throw the ball to first. Now I've got a guy on third and first with 2 outs. The next pitch was a fastball inside, and I threw a wild pitch. The runner ended up scoring. I'm already thinking, God, I'm going to get sent down after this game. That's how my mind was working. I walk the batter. The next guy gets a hit. Then the highlight was Curt Schilling came up to bat. And I'm like, wow, I just watched this guy on TV. Now I'm facing him. I ended up striking him out because he took a fastball looking. It's over. I walk back to the dugout. But my debut went from a 1-pitch double play to a wild pitch, walk, and base hit. But I still ended up staying up for a month. That's Rick DeHart's orientation to the big leagues. Try and do a couple more stories, and I'll do question and answers for you. Jason Bergman comes up 2005 Nationals. All right. Now, he's the 11th round pick by the Expos in 2002. And in 2004, his Florida State League season actually got cut short during the playoffs because of the hurricane. All right. Now let's think about what happens in 2005 when he's with New Orleans for the end of the year. All right. You can kind of guess what happens. All right. So he gets called up during Hurricane Katrina, not before, not after, during Hurricane Katrina. So he gets the news and he actually misses the flight to Washington because he had to go to the stadium, get all this stuff, and then go to the airport. Well, obviously, by the time he got to the stadium, the roads were starting to get packed. He wasn't able to get to the airport in time. All right. He's able to get a flight to Baton Rouge and go on from there. All right. But this is what's going through his head. This is his story when he has that first call where he's trying to make that first flight. I'm sitting there in the car looking at my girlfriend, and I'm like, what if this hurricane screws up my chance of going to the major leagues? I'm in New Orleans. I can't get to the airport, and they need a guy for tomorrow. They could just call a guy from Harrisburg. He'd drive down in no time. That was running through my mind. Obviously, the hurricane was also a huge issue because our stuff was there. Her family was there, everything else. I get a call back. He says, get to Baton Rouge. We got a flight for you at 5:30. Well, we have 3 hours to get to Baton Rouge. It takes 2.5 hours to get there. I barely made the flight. Then I had a decision to make. My girlfriend was driving me to the airport, but she couldn't get back to her family because they had closed off all access due to the hurricane. I'm sitting there at the gate and I'm like, well, how much does it cost for her to fly with me? They named their price. I decided at that point, not only with my baseball life, but my future marriage, come with me. Let's do this. We both flew to Atlanta. I had a connection to DC and she stayed. The team was going to DC or only going to be in DC for one more day and then head to Atlanta. I said, I'll meet you in 24 hours. It was the most amazing and worst day ever. We lost all of our stuff because of the flooding. However, I got to realize my dream of becoming a Major League Baseball player. Jason Bergman's orientation to the big leagues, his call-up story. All right, I'll do one more and then we'll do question and answers. And this will be, I'll be reading a lot of this one because this is one of my favorites. Ryan Roland Smith, 2007 Mariners. All right. He's out of Australia. You know, you don't hear of very many Australian baseball players. He's an undrafted free agent out of Australia in 2000. Now, since he's been in 3 World Baseball Classics and even helped Australia in the 2004 Summer Olympics. I think they may have even got a silver. I think they may have even medaled that year. All right, but after that year, you know, he has what 5 years in. So with the Mariners, he gets Rule 5 picked by the Twins. The Twins take him to, you know, invite him to spring training. You know, he doesn't make the team. He gets sent back to the Mariners. All right, so you can see some ups and downs there, right? He's, you know, when it's what 5-6 seasons in, rubber's kind of meeting the road, right? All right, so it goes into 2005. You know, tries to turn things around, you know, has a decent year. 2006, he ends up with the coach who becomes a coach with the Arizona Fall League later on that fall, and really advocated for him to join the Arizona Fall League roster. He gets on it. He has a good fall league, carries it on into 2007 season. Right. So he's called up in May of 2007 for a series, and he doesn't know who they're playing at that particular time. You know, obviously he's focused on the minor league. At the minor league level, he gets the news that he's going up to the major leagues. He goes outside, and this is what he says. I got outside and Googled who we were playing. We were playing the Yankees. They had a bunch of lefties in the lineup, like Jason Giambi, Hideki Matsui, Johnny Damon, all those guys. I'm like, no freaking way. Not the Yankees. Can't I just face Tampa Bay on a Tuesday? I can't handle this. So he reports. One of the first things he notices when he walks into his locker, you know, you can see that he has a pretty long name. His name is misspelled on his jersey. All right. So he's like, what do I do? This is my first day in the big leagues, right? Do I tell them? He ends up eventually telling the clubhouse manager what the situation is, but he still has to go out to the bullpen with no jersey. He gets the jersey about halfway through the game. Well, he doesn't get into a game. Doesn't get into that series. All right, his words. I get 3 days in the big leagues. I don't pitch. There were a good couple of weeks where I thought that was going to be my story. I got called up, never pitched, no kid's ever going to believe me. I was freaking out. I'm in AAA and I'm like, don't get hurt. Don't get hurt. Just be patient. I was scared. I was never going to have a stat line to prove I was a Major League Baseball player. So this goes back. He goes back to the minor leagues for a few weeks. Well, he gets called back. And I'm going to read the rest of the story here. I went back up. That first night, we're playing the Reds. King Griffey Jr. was back in town for the first time. Again, no soft landing. I'm like, man, can't we just be playing somebody that's not very good and make it easy for me? They had a ceremony for Griffey, and the place was packed. We're down 16-1. I'm like, okay, well, tonight's my night. This is going to happen. I start getting loose, and they say, you're going to face a lefty. Well, there are 3 lefties in that lineup. Josh Hamilton, Adam Dunn, and King Griffey Jr. They're all-stars. I just didn't want to face Griffey. I was so nervous. Well, lo and behold, the first hitter I ever faced was King Griffey Jr. Everybody's on their feet. They all want to see him hit a home run. I come in, they're all on their feet. Not for me. Well, I felt like I hadn't thrown a ball in 2 months. My hand was numb, and all I was thinking about was just throw strikes, don't walk them. You have to remember something. I grew up in Australia in the 90s, before the internet. We didn't have access to players, but we did have access to guys like King Griffey Jr. because he was on The Simpsons. Here I am thinking, man, this dude was on the freaking Simpsons. People back home know who this guy is. I remember I threw my last warm-up pitch, and I walked around a little on the mound trying to look cool. I'm like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. Willie Bloomcrest was playing short. He walked over to me and said, hey, man, just enjoy it. It's another hitter. Have some fun. That calmed me down a little. I said to myself, throw strikes. All of a sudden, I had 2 strikes against him. I'm looking at that iconic stance, and I'm like, I'm going to try and snap off the biggest curveball of my life here. I did. He swung right over it. I swear the place booed me. My mom and stepdad had flown over, but their flight got delayed and they missed the game. When I picked them up, my mom asked, did you pitch? I said, yes. She was a little bummed. I told her I'd face King Griffey Jr. and she said, oh my God. That is Ryan Roland Smith's story. So I think I went over 4 stories. I'm going to go ahead and now at this time, if you have any questions, comments, I definitely would love to hear from you folks. Called Up is available. If you go to calledupproject.com, that site is what I've been managing. It has many different ordering options. McFarland, I would actually suggest McFarland now. If you go direct through McFarland, through Cyber Monday, they actually have 40% off, which pretty good deal. That's actually my so you're not getting a better deal than me as the author if you were to buy the book within the next week. So I want to say it's Holiday 23 on the McFarland site. Obviously, I got links to Amazon, independent bookstores as well. And then also, if you want a ebook, it is available by Kindle and by Nook. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen now, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that I may have from the group. Again, Joe, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate everybody for coming out and their attention.
No problem, Zach, no problem. Anybody have any questions? Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good stuff, very good stuff.
Hi, everyone.
Go ahead, Mike.
I've noticed you were on, in your intro, you were on the committee for the Pacific Coast League baseball player. That's the one DiMaggio played in, right?
Yeah, Joe DiMaggio came up with the San Francisco Seals. I want to say 32 or 33. He spent a few years there. He actually had a 61 game hitting streak in the Pacific Coast League for the Seals before going up to the Yankees. In a unique twist, my uncle was actually purchasing the same deal as Dom DiMaggio, Joe's younger brother, after the 1939 season.
So you can talk, man. The other screen came back on.
Hold on. Where's Jack? He's been traded. That's
right.
Hey,
Called up.
He's been called up.
All right, go ahead.
I see Maxwell's trying to shake, but I don't know if you want to go. I can't. Yeah, you want.
No, the question was actually, can you still hear me?
I can hear you. What?
Well,
What?
there were no teams west of St. Louis until 1958 or 9, whenever the Dodgers moved over. So the Pacific Coast League had a hell of a lot of good players. So your uncle had to be pretty good to get called up by the majors, but there were a lot of people over there that they didn't want to leave the West Coast because they got paid well.
Yeah, I mean, one of my
big league caliber that never made it to the big leagues, and I was wondering if there's anyone or two in particular that you've researched over there that you think may have been a big star in the majors had they wanted to leave the West Coast.
Well, there are quite a few of them. I mean, that's not necessarily directed, like related to the called up book, but yeah, definitely. I mean, for example, the first player, I don't really consider my uncle as the first player I interviewed, just because he was my uncle and we had more casual conversations. The first player I actually interviewed was a guy by the name of Tony Freitas. Tony Freitas is the winningest left-hand pitcher in minor league history. He came up in 1932 with the A's, spent some time with the Reds as well. Came back to the Pacific Coast League, won 20 games, 6 years in a row. Was given the opportunity by Branch Rickey to come up to the Cardinals, and he said, no, I've tried it out. I like playing here in my backyard, which was Sacramento. So yeah, he's not a unique story. But yeah, he ended up winning, I want to say it was 343 minor league games. But he definitely had opportunities to go up, yeah.
Go ahead, Maxwell.
There was a Boston Red Sox yearbook, I think 1989, where they interviewed all the players and asked them about their impressions on getting called up to the majors. Did you use this yearbook as a reference in your book?
I'm not aware of that yearbook. No. I was actually, people say, how did you come up with the idea for this particular book? I'll be candid, I was very shocked nobody else came up with the idea. I mean, every year, you hear a little, viral video, you see little viral videos of somebody calling his mom, saying he got called up to the, to the big leagues after, 9 years or whatnot. And, every once in a while you read little tidbits here and there. And I thought, okay, well, I wonder if somebody's done a book. And I was doing research on it and I thought, gosh, nobody's done a book on this. This is a pretty, popular topic, a human interest topic. So I ended up doing it. I figured, hey, somebody's going to do it. Somebody needs to do it. So I might as well do it. And again, like I said, going back to earlier in the presentation where I talked about just loving, interviewing players and capturing that first person narrative, is what I really wanted to do for this particular book. So each of these stories, they're not like as extensive as some of the other oral histories. Obviously Glory of Time is, what I consider the best. These stories will range, the average is about 850 words. So, and you could, pick it up, flip it around, wherever you want. Yeah. Any other question?
Go ahead, Bob.
Hey, Zach, good to see you.
Hey, Bob.
Question, are you gonna be in Minneapolis? So I guess.
I am planning on Minneapolis, yes. I wanna make it to Minneapolis this year. I didn't make it to Chicago and was bummed about that. So I have every intention of being in Minneapolis this next August.
Great. Look forward to seeing you.
Yeah.
Gloria,
I'm
you
looking
got a
forward
question?
to it.
Yeah, my question was, I'm curious if any of the Astros players were interviewed.
Oh shoot, you know what? I should have mentioned that. I mentioned that to Joe earlier before the meeting. Unfortunately, when all was said and done, I did not have anybody that debuted for the Astros as a sign of release. So there's still some folks who had maybe had a short time with the Astros. I know of at least one story, a guy who debuted against the Astros, which was funny because he actually had he was going to face Nolan Ryan. Nolan Ryan was a very last minute replace or scratch, and Jim DeShays came in. But I remember he was telling me about how, and it's captured in the book, in the story, how he, goes in the Astrodome and he's just intimidated because he's like, he wasn't worried about, facing, Nolan Ryan, being as the opposing pitcher. But keep in mind, National League batters, oftentimes, other than when they're playing other positions in high school, they don't hit in high school. They don't hit in college. They don't hit in the minor leagues. So all of a sudden, you're in the major leagues, and your first day, you're going to face Nolan Ryan at the Astrodome. He said he was pretty relieved when they had a last-minute scratch for Jim DeShays.
Zach, what was the name of that player again that you just told the story of?
Oh, that was a guy, Greg Matthews. He came up in the 1986 Cardinals. He was the one that made his debut against the Astros that year. I think he ended up having a pretty good year. I want to say he won the most games as a Cardinals rookie in quite a long time. I want to say he was like 12 or more wins, something like that.
Okay.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
Hey, Zach, you have a great voice for radio or TV. Did you ever pursue a career in broadcasting?
I have not. I don't pride myself in being the most articulate person, so I appreciate that that compliment. But I haven't done that. I do tend to I don't know, be a little bit more introverted in non-baseball settings. So I don't always portray the most articulate baseball voice sometimes. But when I do have a passionate project, when I'm talking about the stuff that I'm doing, yeah. But I remember a few times as a teenager trying to figure out, okay, well, you suck at baseball. Yeah. Pardon my French. I was not good at baseball, but I loved baseball, right? I'm like, what's going to be my niche, right? So, obviously it's interview players. I'm interested in writing. But I do remember listening to a few games on mute and trying to broadcast myself just to kind of test out, see if I was any good. And obviously nobody's good their first try, but I was pretty terrible. So I didn't pursue it beyond. I didn't pursue it beyond a few times muting as a teenager and going and just trying out a few innings.
Did you say you were in the same chapter with David Krell?
I spoke to David Krell's chapter earlier today.
Oh, okay. Which one is he?
Yeah.
In New Jersey, I think.
No,
he's in New Jersey. I'm in Sacramento area, California. So
I just
we're
finished this book.
basically as far as you can get away.
Zach, I had a question for you.
All right.
What do you think the hardest part of the entire process for the book was? To you, the hardest part? Transcribing interviews, I mean, what was the hardest part?
Transcribing interviews would have been the most difficult part. I actually had a service done with that. So there was actually a call recording service called Rev. You could actually, because I actually conducted all of the interviews from my phone. And I would be able to connect with a player. I'd link up to the app on my phone, record it. I would submit it to Rev. Rev has a couple different options, but I chose the human transcription services, which were much more accurate. The AI transcription services, I want to say at the time, were only like, I don't know, 85%, 90% accurate, which is not good enough for me. I needed about 90. Well, I really needed 100%. And I usually got about 98, 99% from those particular services. But yeah, if I had done all the transcription, I love interviewing players. I love writing. I love organizing the stuff, but listening real slow and transcribing stuff, I've done that before. Ugh, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. It very tedious task. That would have been probably my most challenging and least pleasurable experience of the book. I don't know. I mean, I really enjoyed this whole process, and McFarlane, McFarlane was really good to me and gave me a lot of flexibility with what my thoughts were on how I wanted this book to turn out. They definitely provided some insights and some advice, and we moved around some stuff, and I think it ends up being a pretty good book as a result. But overall, the process is pretty smooth thanks to Rev as my transcription service. And they also have a great if some of you also are interested in that, you upload it through their app, and they have a website to where you can then read the text along with the spoken word, so you can match stuff up, you can move stuff around. It definitely helped me out a lot with my research and with my interviews.
Great stuff. Yeah, another question. Go ahead, Bob. Did you have a problem getting candidates to interview? I mean, what, did anybody turn you down, or where did you get your list for those folks you want?
I didn't really have many challenges. I mean, keep in mind that I wasn't going after Hall of Famers or huge stars that require publicists or agents. I was, and to be candid, I mean, there are quite a few, first round picks in the book that may have made their second spring training, but I tended to gravitate towards the players who were lesser known, who may have, had 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe they have 2 cups of coffee over 3 or 4 years. I tended to gravitate to those stories because typically those stories were the ones of, somebody, if they're in the minors for, one guy is in the minors for 12 years. But a lot of those, going after those particular players, a lot of those players were more receptive and willing and wanting to share their story. So when I reach out to players, I reach out to them. I took a kind of a shotgun approach. A lot of them actually came out of social media, though. Like if you see somebody on Facebook, you interview them. Maybe they have a few friends. All of a sudden, your Facebook friend suggestion is a bunch of major leaguers. So I started getting the contacts that way too. I would also search social media for like MLB alum or former MLB ER or MLBer, something like that. A lot of those players had those in their Facebook or Twitter biographies. I'd reach out that way. Also, a lot of players, after their playing career, they choose a career that's a little bit more competitive. So they're a lot of them go into maybe financial sales or real estate, and as a result, those phone numbers are often online. So I would call up folks, do cold calls, send them text messages, say, hey, do you have 15, 20 minutes to chat? And I had a pretty good reception. I think that, if there were only a few players that said no, I figured that most of them, I mean, that said, there were a lot of, at least half the players I reached out to just didn't respond. But I would still, I still got a pretty good response. When all was said and done, I got 149. I interviewed 149 players about their call-ups and their debuts. Ultimately, when all was said and done, I ended up with 109 signed releases, which then allowed their stories to be in the book. So overall, I was very happy with the reception I got from players. And keep in mind, like I said, I wasn't going after Hall of Famers or high-profile folks that help this stuff, though.
Okay, go ahead.
I got one call-up that's kind of ironic. That's September 14th, 1976. It was a doubleheader between the Astros and the Braves. And between the first and second game, they called the Braves called up a kid named Al Autry, pitch against the Astros. He pitched 5 innings, gave up 4 runs, but got the win. Afterwards, they sent him down and he never appeared in another major league game. His only game he got. There's only one other player in the history of baseball that ever happened to. But in the oddity of the first game of that doubleheader, it was Joe West's first major league game. He went on to a 5,460 game career. The other kid had 1. They were on the same day.
That is cool. And actually, there are a few stories. There are actually a few stories of players with only 1 game. There's a guy by the name of Michael Belfiore came up 3 different times with the 2013 Baltimore Orioles. Finally, his 3rd call up, he gets into a game after about a week or so of sitting the bench. He knows it's going to be lefty-lefty matchup. They're playing the Red Sox. He gets in. He faces David Ortiz, his very first hitter. David Ortiz hits a home run off of him. He doesn't appear in another major league game. He says, at the time, he was obviously a little bit disappointed and upset, but a decade later, he could kind of appreciate and understand that other people can enjoy that tidbit and understand that story.
All right, yeah, great stuff, Zach. Great stuff.
Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you to the whole group. Again, calledupproject.com. Many different ordering options. If you do a Google search, whatever, you're going to find it. But definitely would recommend get it from McFarland if you want an in-print edition ordering between now and Monday, 40% off.
Okay.
And then also the ebook and everything.
All right. Thanks again, Zach. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hope everybody has a great night. And I'll go ahead and put my contact information in here in the chat. And if anybody has any questions that pop up, a few minutes, you can just go ahead and shoot me an email. I'll be happy to engage with you.
All right. You heard that. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, everybody. Hope everybody has a great night. I'll see you later.
Yeah, happy night.
Hope to see you in Kaplan. Take care. Bye.
All right. Thank you, Zach. One thing I didn't get a chance to talk about because I wanted to wait until our next presentation, because our next presentation is about a Hall of Famer. Okay? The next presentation is about Ernie Harwell. All right? Jimmy Scruggs is going to give a brief book review about Ernie Harwell. But the Hall of Fame ballot for 2024 was released yesterday. Is this the year Billy Wagner finally gets in?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I say if he gets in, we should have a chapter trip to the Hall of Fame induction ceremony.
Oh, no.
Okay? Maybe we can go, and is anybody else that you think is going to get in next year? Sure thing. Adrian Beltre?
Yeah, Beltre.
This is Gary Sheffield's last year on the ballot. Will he get in? No? Okay. Will Carlos Beltran get in?
No.
Okay.
Well, you meant the Astro.
For obvious reasons. Joe Mauer.
Yeah.
He should?
Maybe.
Chase Utley. Okay. There's a couple other players, but we got another presentation. But what we like to do every year, I know the Rogers Hornsby chapter likes to do a Hall of Fame sort of vote. And then, at the end of the meeting, they just kind of go over the results with everybody. And we did it last year, right, Herb? So in December, I would like us to have our own chapter Hall of Fame vote. All right. And at the end of the meeting in December, Herb and whoever else will give the results of who we think will go into the Hall of Fame. Okay. So stay tuned for the December meeting for that. So we're going to do that. Yeah, Mike.
I just wanted you to mention that Sabre Day is in January, and we need to have, it's February.
Sabre Day was February 2nd.
February 3rd. Yeah, January first birthday.
Yeah. We can do that.
Two meetings and then Sabre Day.
Yeah, but there's also Astros Fan Fest. That's January what? Bob? January
I go to the date, I'm shot.
26th or something like that?
Earlier than that.
Yeah.
Okay, we always have a booth.
News letter. What's that? The date's in the newsletter. Tell me unrated.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have a Sabre Day event in early February, and last year we had it at Jack's. I got a couple of things on my mind as far as what we can do this year, but we'll talk about that next month.
Well, I was just gonna let you say, because I remember that
Yeah, if you have an idea for a chapter event for Sabre Day in February, by all means, share it with us. Okay, so think about it while you're eating your turkey this week. You know, if you want to just send an email, hey, let's do this, we can ask everybody.
Oh, don't forget, Las Vegas.
Oh, and the Oakland A's, yes,
Whoa, I didn't know.
the Las Vegas A's. What do you think? What is that? They're playing in a minor league park next year, right?
Yeah, we're signing out.
They're playing in Oakland next year. One more year.
And also the.
And then 3 more years before we're playing in Las Vegas. Right. I was gonna say, after those opens, Las Vegas, what are the odds? Right. They're not doing it, right?
Right, they're not doing one.
Don't forget, they played there for a week.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Beginning of the '90 season, because the ballpark wasn't ready in Oakland because of the earthquake.
There we go. Little trivia for you. But hey, before we get any further, Jimmy, you have a question?
If Wagner gets in and people want to go, I recommend getting room really, really early because they have tournaments at Cooperstown and rooms will be at a premium.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
plan very, very early.
Right.
Well, you can stay at.
Thanks, Jimmy. And without further ado,
Yeah, Albany, Wisconsin.
That's been serious time. Stay in Cooperstown. Cooperstown. That's awesome.
Staying only us.
It's only on.
Oh, yeah, that's the best spot, yeah. 20 minutes.
But that's where all the players and their families are gonna stay as well. I know, where I got inducted in the same way. We had rooms for all the people that are in there. Yeah, I remember when you guys got there. No, you don't. You don't remember. They don't even know it. 6 months back, you church.
okay.
Let's go. We're down there. I can't wait to get down there.
All right, everyone. Jimmy's going to talk about his Ernie Harwell book. Okay, take it away, Jimmy.
Thank you. This is a biography of W. Ernest Harwell, and I'll get to the W later. But I got this online, and as a bonus, it's autographed by Ernie Harwell, but it's to Chuck. And I can't make Jimmy, Jim, or James out of Chuck, unfortunately. But I'll pass it along. I really enjoyed the book and doing other research. He was a lot more than a baseball announcer. They've called him the poet laureate of baseball, and I'll get to that a little later. He mentored a lot of the announcers. He mentored a lot of print media. He was one of the founding members of the baseball chapel. In fact, in the early 60s, he started spring training with a Bible verse, Song of Solomon. So there was a lot more to Ernie Harwell than calling balls and strikes. He grew up in the Atlanta area. His father, he grew up actually about 100 miles from Atlanta. And his father and his uncle had a furniture store that catered to farmers in the area. And business was good until the boll weevils destroyed the crops. And since they sold their furniture on credit, that ended the furniture store. So they moved to Atlanta. And his first major league experience was when he was 12 years old at a Atlanta Crackers game, where he had an impromptu meeting with Babe Ruth. He went from the cheap seats to the standing to the press box, sitting. And he was face to face with Babe Ruth, but unfortunately he didn't have a piece of paper. He had a pen. So Babe Ruth signed his shoe.
See,
And unfortunately, Ernie just kept wearing the shoe. So the shoe got worn out. And one of the neat things about him was, and getting to the W. Ernest part, was when he was 16 years old, he was an avid reader of the sporting news. And many of you in here are familiar with the sporting news. And he noticed that they didn't have anything about the Southern Association and his beloved Atlanta Crackers. So he wrote a letter to the sporting news asking him to be the Atlanta correspondent. And he thought Ernie Harwell sounded too young. So he wrote the letter, signed it, W. Ernest Harwell. He got the gig and it lasted for 31 years. So like I said, there's a lot more to Ernie Harwell. His father unfortunately had some very severe health issues. Shortly after they moved to Atlanta, he had a brain hemorrhage. And Ernie had to hustle to help the family make it. He had a paper route. His paper route included Margaret Mitchell, the author of Gone with the Wind, which I thought was a neat story. He sold magazines, and he went to Emory University, and he was inducted. He was drafted, but he decided to go with the Marines, and he stayed 4 years with the Marines. But before he went to the Marines, he helped radio broadcast the 1942 massacre started in its infancy. In fact, he helped. One of his assignments was following Bobby Jones while Bobby Jones played around. So during the Marines, they took advantage of his writing skills and used him to write and cover events. He was stationed in Atlanta for 2 years. And actually, that's when he started his first broadcast. While a Marine, he did some broadcasting for the Crackers. Even though he donated his salary to the service, there was a lot of flack. He stopped announcing. So that was the end of his first assignment, announcing. So after being discharged from the service, he went back to the Crackers and started announcing. So everybody in here knows the story about Branch Rickey. Famous baseball person, invented the farm system and so forth. But what Branch Rickey also did is he burned off. And he found Ernie Harwell as an announcer. So they had this cloak and dagger meeting in spring training where Ernie gets a call, said, look, you need to go to this hotel, meet Branch Rickey. So Ernie gets the call, goes to the hotel, and there sitting, drinking a cup of coffee is Branch Rickey. So they iron out the details of his first major league contract. And in July of 1948, he goes to the Dodgers as one of their announcers because Red Barber was having some health issues. So he filled in for Red Barber the rest of the 48 season. At the end of the 48 season, he was approached by the New York Giants to become one of their announcers. He turned them down, finished the 49 season with the Dodgers. And then for 50, 51, 52, and 53.
that has something to do with you. It's on the wall and the.
Okay,
He was an announcer for the Giants. He was on the TV broadcast.
the hell with it.
He was on the TV broadcast for the shot heard around the world. In fact, before the game, he says, guys, it's so horrible that my good friend Russ Hodges is only going to be on radio and I'm going to be on TV. So kind of a precursor for what happened down the road with him with the Tigers. The Giants discharged him after the end of the 53 season. And the St. Louis Browns moved to Baltimore and they needed an announcer. Ernie followed him to Baltimore. And he worked there from 54 to 59. Part of that time, he worked with George Kell. The Orioles weren't very good in the first year. They lost 100 games. They had a couple of respectable seasons. And he worked with George Kell, saw George Kell play at the end of his career, and also saw the beginning of Brooks Robinson's career with the Orioles. And then what happened was he found out in fact, George Kell called him because after George Kell left the Orioles, he went to the Tigers, who he had played
Maybe
for.
they muted the meeting.
And in that era of broadcasting, usually the number one announcer was tied into the sponsor. In most cases, it was beer. And the Tigers had made a change from Global Beer to Stroh's Beer. And Van Patrick, who'd been a longtime Tiger announcer, they discharged him because the guy from Stroh says, well, he can't sell my beer because he's been selling Global Beer for all these years. So that was how Ernie Harwell got to the Tigers. Kind of a sponsorship change. And during his time there, they had the 68 World Series. Also, the 68 All-Star game was in Detroit. And Ernie, for some of you people will remember, Jose Feliciano sang the national anthem at the 68.
Oh, great job.
He did a great job, and it was very, very controversial. The switchboard lit up. After that, there was a lot of negative toward it. But even through the years, Ernie stood by his selections. The number 2 choice that he didn't pick was Marvin Gaye. So, in talking about the 68 World Series briefly, the Tigers had a real good season, almost won the 67 pennant. They were ready for Bear. They thought they had the best team in baseball. They made it to the World Series, played the Cardinals, and a really good quote from Willie Horton, who was their star left fielder, was, we knew we had a good team, and they did scouting, kind of like Michigan. They did scouting more than other teams of that era.
Do it again.
And one of the things they picked up was Lou Brock. That because Lou Brock was such a great base stealer, when he would be on second base, a lot of times the outfielders wouldn't try to throw him out. So what Brock developed was bad habits. He would give up his stride. So in a key play of Game 5, Mickey Lolich was pitching. Willie Horton tells, I knew Lolich always got his second win and that Mike Shannon was not going to pull him. He moves over more toward left center. That's where Shannon hits the single. Horton comes up and fires. Bill Freehand sees that Brock broke his stride. He's tagged out and the series changed on that play. Tigers won Game 6 in a blowout. And then we all know about Kurt Flood misplaying a ball and the Tigers win the World Series.
Hard to bring out it all.
I'm sorry?
Hard to throw out Brock.
Horton threw out Brock, yes. And they also won during his years, the 84 World Series.
Yeah.
Which was a great team. They started out 35-5. And then, like most people, unless you're really, really lucky, as Mark Cuban said, everybody's an entrepreneur till they get hit in the face. Well, Bo
Goddamn what, he keeps muting.
Bo Schembelecker and the radio station head gave Ernie Harwell a left hook in 1990. Normally, Ernie got his contract in June for the following year. Well, come July, come August, he hadn't got his contract. So finally, he steps into Bo's and said, we need to talk. So they arrange a meeting. They arrange the meeting and Bo says, you got a 1-year contract for X amount of money, which was less than what Ernie was making the previous year. So Ernie Harwell was actually fired. There's a lot of blame. Some people blame Bo Schembechler. Some people blame the guy at the head of the radio station. But for whatever reason, Ernie Harwell was fired after the 1990 season. The radio guy actually wanted to cut him off then. But Bo said, no, you got to give him one last year so he can say goodbye to everybody. So during the 1991 season, Ernie's talking to an announcer for the Mariners. In fact, he's still the announcer for them, Rick Riz. And Ernie, knowing that his situation was precarious, told Rick that he ought to apply for his job, which he eventually did, and actually replaced Ernie for 3 years. But what happened, talking about sponsorships, is the owner of the Tigers that owned Domino's Pizza sold to the guy who had Little Caesars Pizza. And one of his goals was to bring Ernie Harwell back, which they did in 1993 on a part-time basis. The other 3 guys finished out their contracts. And then Ernie did TV between 94 and 99 and then came back to the radio. And then he remained with the Tigers until 2008. But he was a member of the Hall of Fame in 1981. Like I said, he did a lot of other things other than just announce baseball. Anybody in here ever lived in the Detroit area? What do you remember about Ernie?
Well, I mean, he just can visualize the game. He did a great job. He did a great job with George Kell with his sidekick in Detroit. And I just would sit there and just listen to all the games. And I don't remember any sayings he had, like, holy cow, or
he was very, very low key.
Right.
His home run call was, that's long gone.
Yeah.
A double play was 2 for the price of 1. But one of his unique calls, I thought, was when there was a foul ball caught, he says, well, somebody from Saginaw is taking a ball back. Then he would fill in with a different city. In fact, he was in Kroger one time. He said, hey, Gertie, how about somebody from Traverse City taking a ball home sometime?
I heard it was both Brooklyn and I'm old enough. I heard it Brooklyn and from the Giants.
Okay.
It was excellent. And they had great announcers in New York at that time, as you know, Red Barber, Mel Allen, and on and on. But he stood out with the way he spoke. He was not the lead announcer for the Giants. Russ Hines, right? But the way he delivered the story was, I thought it was great.
I think, I never listened to him. I did hear him sometimes because not only did he do the Masters, he did some NBC stuff. In the 92 season, he did about 20 games for the Angels. He did the 63 World Series with Joe Garagiola on radio. Funny story about that. He was sick as a dog before the game 1 of the 63 series. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, he gets up, tries to find a drugstore to get some medicine. So he goes to the drugstore, gets the medicine. He's walking down the street. He runs into Harry Carey. Harry Carey was not sick. And it was, to quote Ernie, he was tomcatting. But he ended up being able to answer the call.
Is it true that when Ernie was with Atlanta, that Rancher, he tried to get us and he traded us baseball?
Cliff, no, he traded he's the only announcer who traded for a player.
Okay, I know they traded for something. I love baseball also.
101 in negotiation, you get something up, you get something back. So the Crackers were losing their announcer, so they got a catcher back. Cliff Dapper.
He also had a lot of background
he would talk about the game of the players. And I remember Phil Regan's first major league start, not league, the start, was with the Tigers. And he was from around Detroit, Wayland, Michigan. And Ernie Harwell went into a long story about Phil Regan and him coming in. And it was like 8 innings in his very first start. And they didn't win any games for the Tigers that year, and go in 4 like that. And but he'd go into the background of all these players. He wouldn't just say the stats or this, the stats that. He would talk about the players. Yeah, what I thought was really neat in reading that book is when Ichiro came to the United States to play baseball, on his short list of things to do was to meet Ernie Harwell, which is really neat. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with this book, Voices of Summer.
Hmm.
It's a really good book where the author ranks the top 101 radio announcers. And Vince Scully's 1, Mel Allen is 2, and in this book, Ernie's number 3. And there's some other rankings out recently that had him 10th and one had him 16th. But in any number, you know, he was a special announcer. George Kell in there, because I thought he was good too, by the way. I'll let you look at that. Yeah. Jimmy, what's your connection to Ernie Harwell that made you want to speak about or read the book? I'm really interested in the baseball announcers. And when I read this book, you know, I said, you know, I need to. And one of the neat things about this book is learning about Ernie Harwell. I grew up in Memphis, so I listened to Harry Carey and Jack Buck. But what's neat about this book is you can read about the guy that did the Indians for 20 years. That, you know, like guys in here that grew up in Houston, Gene Elston. You know, I never listened to Gene Elston. And I know that, you know, some of y'all that listen to him have memories. Trust. He was a member of our chapter. There you go. How about that? He was a member of our chapter. I have one more thing to add. Go ahead. This is he started out as a poem in 1955, and to really show you how much it's appreciated, it's been translated into 6 languages. It's America, this baseball, a reissued newsreel of boyhood dreams. Dreams lost somewhere between boy and man, he wrote. In baseball, democracy shines its clearest. Here, the only race that matters is the race to the bag. Baseball was a ballet without music, drama without words, a carnival without Cupid dolls. It was chagrin in being picked off base, humor holding its sides with an errant puppy eluding 2 groundskeepers and the fastest outfielder, and pathos dragging itself off the field after being knocked from the box. Baseball, nicknames were baseball. Names like Zeke and Pie and Kiki and Home Run and Cracker and Dizzy and Daffy. It told the story of David and Goliath, of Samson, Cinderella, Paul Bunyan, Homer's Iliad, the Count of Monte Cristo. Baseball was cigar smoke, roasted peanuts, the sporting news, winter trades, down in front, the 7th inning stretch, sore arms, broken bats, a no-hitter, the strains of the Star Spangled Banner. This is a game for America. This baseball, a game for boys and for men. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, everybody. For the last thing of the evening, those of you who've never been with us before, we do a trivia contest. Okay. Hopefully everybody stays for it. The author of this trivia contest is Maxwell, who's in Toronto right now. I assume, yeah, your apartment. I know it's Maxwell's apartment because there's always Kramer from Seinfeld. I know Maxwell's at home. So, baseball in the 1980s, is it right? Right, Maxwell?
That's it.
Let's go to the 1980s.
Yeah, we're going back to the time of Rubik's cubes and shoulder pads and Atari and
Got you.
two games for the price of one, Ernie Harwell style.
Right. So those of you, hopefully everybody can stay. If you can't, please join us next month. Have a nice Thanksgiving if you can't stay with them. But hopefully everybody can. Even those of you online can participate.
All right.
Yeah,
So
let's get the quiz. Then we got the quiz.
Maxwell, we'll give them what, 5-10 minutes?
Hold on, I'm gonna show the questions.
Oh, well, never mind. All right. You want to read it, Maxwell?
sure.
Remember, you can team up.
Yes, you can. This is a team sport.
Can,
You can group up.
can everyone hear
And
me?
the winner gets a prize.
Can everyone hear
Hopefully
me?
it won't be Maxwell, hopefully it won't be a prize that somebody already had.
All right. So first of all, who led the American League in stolen bases in 1987 for 1 point?
Hold on a second, Maxwell. Everybody ready? Hold on a second. Is everybody ready for Maxwell to read the questions?
Are we teaming up or?
Yeah, team up. Go ahead, team up. Go ahead, Maxwell.
All right. Who led the American League in stolen bases in 1987 for 1 point? Who led?
Who cares? It's the greatest decade of the 20th century. What do you mean, Mike? I'm a 1980s kid. Yes, it was. In my opinion. In my opinion. Who led the American League in stolen bases in 1987?
We ready for the next question?
Question 2. Go ahead, Maxwell.
All right. Which 4 players of the 1950s were still playing in the 1980s?
Which 4 players of the 1950s were still playing in the 1980s? Okay. So that's good.
I think I heard one of them.
Put it down.
I'll probably get one question right. Chris is in here.
That's just, I didn't print properly, but yeah, it's there. Two pages up there. Somebody read these or read this?
Yeah. Question 3. Go ahead, Maxwell.
All right. Before I continue, I just have some sad news to report. Carlos Robinson has informed us that Rick Bush passed away last month.
Yeah, one of our newest members. Go ahead, say that again, Maxwell.
Rick Bush passed away last month. Carlos Robinson wanted everybody to know.
Rick Bush, he's a member of our chapter, right? So, yeah,
And
thanks for reminding. Yeah,
and was very helpful in the production of my book. Anyway, back to the trivia contest. Which 1980s pitcher won the most games in the history of the Houston Astros? Which 1980s pitcher won the most games in the history of the Houston Astros?
Question 4.
Question 4. Of the 26 teams in the major leagues in the 1980s, all but 5 made the playoffs at least once. Which were the unlucky 5 teams not to make the playoffs in the 1980s?
Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay was not in the league in the 1980s, so they don't count.
Oh, my.
attendees.
Okay, not just 19. No, I think it was the. It was all, and then it was still reading segments, the shelves in his mouth. That was all. Even as I'm.
I think probably was,
I don't keep on it to me.
Want me to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Question number 5. Who was the final out in Nolan Ryan's record-breaking 5th no-hitter?
Oh, come on, that was a softball. Maybe.
yeah, we got it. Ready to go.
They weren't around.
Number 6.
Number 6, on September 11, 1985, Pete Rose rapped his 4,192nd hit, which at that time was believed to have been the record. Name the pitcher, the catcher, the first baseman for the opposing team. And the opposing team. So for 4 points, we need the pitcher, the catcher, the first baseman, and the team.
Pitcher, catcher, first baseman, and the team.
That's right.
And the team. Question 7.
Question 7, true or false? In 1987, a former major league pitcher set the record for finishing a Big Texan steak in Amarillo. That's a 72-ounce steak in fewer than 10 minutes.
Joe Thompson, Charlie Crockwell.
Really?
How fast we come back?
I've been there. Never been there. They got they've got like these lights like over you.
Oh my God.
Like on stage.
Oh.
It looked like a rock.
Yeah.
I got a picture of it in the lobby. It looks like really nice.
All right.
But you gotta have a sound to make it.
Number 8. In the song Talking Baseball, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke, 6 1980s players cited in the final stanza are now in the Hall of Fame. Who were the 6 players?
I haven't ever heard that. Yeah, I'll say, keep your ears and stuff. Yeah. You know, that be your smile. What it does, you
Go ahead, Maxwell.
All right, number 9. 2 of the most important pitchers in the history of the Los Angeles Dodgers were on their opening day roster in 1988, but neither one pitched in the World Series. Who were they?
Or your houses.
Number 10.
Number 10. In Game 1 of the 1988 ALCS, the entire Boston Red Sox starting lineup consisted of homegrown players, including the pitcher and the designated hitter. Who were they?
You're exactly. Oh, okay. You know, he was one of them. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay, okay, I got you.
Number 11.
Number 11. Only one player has won as many as 3 World Series championships in the 1980s. Who was he?
Only one player won as many as 3 championships in the 80s.
That's right. Number 12. Who hit the most home runs in the Ford, Carter, and Reagan administrations? And it was the same guy in all 3 of them.
Ford, Carter, and Reagan administration.
Where's the? See, that's 73 through 86. When I check out New York.
13.
All right. 13. What 3 players of the 1980s were still playing in the 2010s?
John said.
And then the last one, which team had the best overall regular season record between 1980 and 1989? And the bonus, what player appeared on 9 different baseball cards in the 1986 top set?
Wow. All right. Are we ready for the answers? All right, Maxwell.
All right, the answers. For number 1, the American League player to lead the league in stolen bases in 1987. How many people thought Ricky Henderson?
No, we don't get that. I did. I did. Apparently it's not right.
So it's not Ricky Henderson. Ricky?
1987 was the only year of the 80s that the American League was not led in stolen bases by Ricky Henderson. It was Harold Reynolds. Harold Reynolds with 60 stolen bases. Which 4 players of the 1950s were still playing in the 1980s?
All right, go ahead.
Jim Cott, Tim McCarver, Willie McCovey,
Oh,
and Minnie Minoso.
great questions. Yeah, I know. I got my battery, but it's just right. And the notes are probably not getting it. Too intense.
Which pitcher won the most games? Which 80s pitcher won the most games in the history of the Houston Astros? Necro is correct.
Pretty good.
I'm the only one I get right.
I'm
the only one I get right.
Of the 26 teams in the major leagues in the 1980s, all but 5 made the playoffs at least once. Who are the unlucky 5 teams? Rangers is one. Seattle's another one.
White Sox.
White Sox in 83, they made it.
What was the answer? Seattle, White Sox?
Indians,
Pirates?
Pirates, Cleveland.
Pittsburgh and Cleveland are correct. And what's the 5th one?
Orioles, Toronto.
Cincinnati.
We love them 3 and 4, Maxwell.
What's that?
Cincinnati,
3 and 4.
Cincinnati, Cleveland,
All right,
Pittsburgh, Seattle,
Cincinnati,
and Texas.
Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Seattle, and Texas.
Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. So who was the 5 again?
Cincinnati,
Seattle. Go ahead.
Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Seattle, Texas.
Cincinnati.
Number 5.
All right, the Pete Rose question. The pitcher, the catcher, and the first baseman.
No, you're one off.
Number 5.
Number 5. I missed one. Who's the final out?
Dusty Baker.
Right.
Oh, that's very
Now,
Yeah.
Number 6.
number 6, the Pete Rose question. Hit number 4,192. What team was it against? Who were the pitcher, catcher, and first baseman? Padres is correct.
Eric Shaw.
Eric Shaw is the pitcher.
Bruce Bochy.
Bruce Bochy's the catcher.
Oh, Steve Garvey.
Steve Garvey's the first baseman.
Wow.
Now, I asked you that question to ask you this question. In 1985, of Pete Rose, Steve Garvey, and Bruce Bochy, which would have been the least likely to make the Hall of Fame?
I'll take that bet.
Yeah.
All right, true or false? A former major league pitcher set the record for finishing a big Texan in fewer than 10 minutes. True, 100%. Does anyone know the pitcher?
Bo Belinsky.
No.
Farrell.
No.
Heward Perry.
Wrong.
Kerfeld. Mike Duran. Who's? Charlie Kerfeld.
No. Although
Yes.
Kerfeld probably could have. No, it was Frank Pastore, the Cincinnati Reds. He finished a big Texan in 9.5 minutes.
Number 8.
Number 8. I found a recording of the song. Do you think it's loud enough that I'd be able to play it?
Yes.
All right,
Go ahead.
let's try it.
Let's all sing it. Really big. It's a single. All right. Hey, say.
Moses at the vet. Rusty again as a Met. And the great Alexander is pitching again in Washington. I'm talking baseball. Like Reggie Keys and Berry talking baseball. Carew and Gaylord Terry. See the dog fit and bite a blue. If Cooperstown is calling, it's no fluke. They'll be with Willie, Mickey, and the Duke.
All right, did everybody get the 6 players?
Smith, by blue.
Mike Schmidt, by
Lot of blues.
Might have Blues not in the Hall of Fame.
There we go. Oh.
George Brett, Reggie Jackson, Rod Carew, Gaylord Perry, Tom Seaver, and Mike Schmidt. Number 9. The Dodgers pitchers were on the opening day roster in 1988.
Maxwell, Mike wants the answers again.
Oh, it was George Brett, Reggie Jackson, Rod Carew, Gaylord Perry, Tom Seaver, and Mike Schmidt.
Well, Willie Mackey and the dude.
They didn't play in the 80s,
That's what I'm saying.
and neither did the great Alexander for that matter.
Number 9.
Number 9, the Dodgers pitchers on opening day 1988 who weren't there for the World Series. Who were they?
Valenzuela.
Valenzuela was one, and the other one?
That's Don Sutton.
Don Sutton. You're right. Nicely done.
He played for Milwaukee that year.
No, he was Sutton was cut. Sutton was cut in order to make room for Ramon Martinez.
Number 10.
Number 10. Game 1 of the 1988 ALCS. The entire Boston Red Sox starting lineup was homegrown. Who were the 10 players?
Louis Keon.
No, he was retired by then.
Jim Lonborn. Roger Clemens.
Roger Clemens did not pitch game 1.
Wayne Gaines. Bob Stanley.
Bob Stanley didn't pitch game 1 either.
Jim Lonborn.
Jim Lonborg was practicing dentistry by then.
Go ahead.
All right. You know what? We're just going to forfeit this question because I was obviously a dud, but I'll give you the answer anyway. So it's first base was Todd Benzinger, second base Marty Barrett, third base Wade Boggs, shortstop Jody Reed. The 3 outfield positions were Mike Greenwell, Ellis Burks, and Dwight Evans, Rich Gedman catcher, Jim Rice DH, and the pitcher was Bruce Hurst.
Okay.
We got plenty. So one, that's
Number 11.
one more than I got.
Only one player won as many as 3 world championships in the 1980s. Who was he?
Who? Swanee Smith?
Lonnie Smith is right.
Oh, wow. There you go, Patrick.
There you go, Patrick. Yeah.
Philadelphia Phillies, 1980. St. Louis Cardinals, 1982. And Kansas City Royals, 1985. Most home runs in the Ford, Carter, and Reagan administrations? Mike Schmidt. What 3 players?
Number 13.
What 3 players of the 1980s were still playing in the 2010s?
Jamie Moyer.
Jamie Moyer's right?
Adrian Beltre.
No.
John Smoltz.
Adrian Beltre only started in 1998.
Boys Wilhelm.
John Smoltz.
The Smoltz retired. Smoltz retired in 2009.
Omar Vizquel. Thanks.
Did I hear Omar Vizquel?
Yes, you did.
Omar Vizquel.
Omar Vizquel is correct. And the third one, I'll give you a clue. He was on The Simpsons.
Homer Simpson played for Ken Griffey Jr.
You got it. Ken Griffey Jr. And the team with the best overall record between 1980 and 1989.
Cardinals. Philly.
That's it.
Minnesota.
Philly.
The Mets.
Dodgers. Royals.
Dodgers.
Tampa Bay.
Astros. Phillies.
I haven't heard it yet.
Astros.
No.
Dodgers.
Nope.
Blue Jays?
No.
Oakland.
But the Cardinals.
Twins?
You never got it. It was a room full of experts.
What league?
Keep going.
American League.
American League.
American League. That's not Cleveland.
East Division.
Minnesota. Yankees?
Yes.
Yankees. Yankees is correct.
Really?
Oh, I thought you were talking about a real team.
Those are corrupt. Nothing to show for it.
And the player was on 9 different cards in 1986.
Tony Wood, Rose, Thompson.
It was Pete Rose.
He Rose. He's the best player of 20.
So how many answers?
So we're going to make this out of 30 instead of 35 because nobody liked the Boston question.
That's not possible.
All right, so out of 30?
Out of 30, yeah.
We got 2. That's close. That's it. Oh, yeah, I got a lot of it.
Anybody get 15?
I got 2.
The whole team.
You wanna get double digits? That's all. I hear a little bit here. That's got it. What? The newlywed got 13. 13. Wow. All right, how good. How many you got, Thompson?
I got 13.
You got a 13. You got 13. All right.
I got 13.
Oh, do we have 14?
Anybody with 14?
Let's team event.
Yeah.
It's all you, Joe. You can write the
All right, he wrote the last, so it's your turn.
All right, congratulations, my second ever trivia contest. Co-winner. Co-winner. Thanks, Nick. Well, I get to give myself and yes, I get. All right, everybody, December 18th, Greg Lucas, do not miss it. And we're deciding as a group who's going in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
All right, happy Thanksgiving.
We're gonna play a tribute to Ernie Harwell.
We're gonna play a tribute to Ernie Harwell.
With Joe Weston singing, Bill Slater acted our music, and I didn't make it.
Okay.
It's on
Cool. Glad to hear that.
now.
I'm gonna leave. See you next month. But don't leave yet. Oh, we got some free books over here, by the way.
Search.
So I gotta write the next trivia contest. Is that what you're saying? All right. Bye. Have a great day, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. I read that guy. I was growing such reading. I put I don't want to sing. What's the about 20 questions? Hey, Mom. Hey, Starbucks. Sung by Joe. Sure, here we go. All right, okay, everybody. So we got it. Okay, everybody. All right. I really good. It's Joe Van Sank.
West Slate guy, and then an umpire. I know Slate guy couldn't use it. They didn't know his house.
That is so.
That's his CD. I'm cool. That's Joe Singh.
I had a chance to meet Ernie Harwell when I was a kid. He was a great.
He called me and beat me. And I have a.
That is really. He signed an autograph when I was a kid. It's
Thanks, stadium.
and that's his name. I was That's his name.
It was great.
Nice to meet you tonight, Brett.
Nice meeting you.
That's my wife.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. She stole my name tag. I'm Vince, but she's name.
I'm Fred, but I'm all thanks.
Got it.